The opinions expressed in the following program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.
Welcome to GRASPP Beyond, where we talk about paranormal, cryptids, UFO, and other crazy things. Tonight we are talking about Bigfoot. And once again, Brandon is with us.
Yep.
So I'd like to thank you once again for showing up.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So recently, Kent County Paranormal and GRASPP did a joint training up in the UP with one of the Bigfoot teams up there.
Mm-hmm.
Would you
Bill,
like
if you remember the whole name of it, if you want to go on that.
Turn my mic on here. It is the Upper Peninsula Bigfoot Sasquatch Research Organization. The only paranormal team I know that's got a longer name than us.
That's why I wanted your help with it.
Yep. Okay. I do remember that the last time we were on, Kathy mentioned the next episode would be about angels and demons, and I do apologize for that. There have been some happenings going on, and that segment will be postponed for right now. But let's get back to the training. Now, I did not go up there. I know that Bill, Connie, you, and was there anyone else?
Yeah, it was just largely us. Then their group, and I know at least for one night, some members of Detroit Paranormal Expeditions, another paranormal team out of Detroit. They joined us up there for like one night, and then they kind of left because it was all raining. So we stayed the whole weekend.
Okay.
So that was interesting.
So could you tell us a little bit about the training?
Yeah, the training was interesting. They're kind of going over kind of some of the things that they do. And I was really surprised, like a lot of what they do is similar to what we do as paranormal investigators. It's a little bit different because obviously you're trying to communicate with an animal instead of communicating with a human spirit. So
you guys attempt to communicate with them?
Well, attempted like doing whoops and howls and tree knocks and stuff like that. That's kind of what they were teaching us. The first night we were out there, we were all kind of going around to different points, like around the campground, going on hikes to different areas. And we were getting some howls back, but it's hard really to say what animal it would be.
Okay.
And there was a large group of us, so I think if there was anything, it's probably keeping more its distance.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it could have been just another team.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see anybody else out there. I think it was largely just our group. But, I mean, I think we were about 5 miles from any other type of group out there. So,
wow.
Yeah. It's way out, like nowhere, so.
Yeah, we were 7 miles from the nearest house. Mm-hmm. And the nearest town was Germfask. And we were about 12 miles from there. It was the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think it was another team. It was probably another animal with responding. Like I'm not saying that's Bigfoot or whatever, Because mine is, from my views on it, I think it's definitely possible that could exist, but I don't know if it's a living animal, if it's, a spirit, or possibly something of the fae, of the fairy realm. Because out of some other experiences we had there, it makes me kind of wonder, and some of the things that they kind of talked about. Because like when we were up there, they were sitting there telling like all these different stories of like Bigfoot like sidetracking along, like while people would be walking down the trail, of them like at least seeing like a figure kind of back there. But one other thing I thought was kind of interesting too, because they were talking about like sometimes if they get pictures of them, they'll see like a green orb, like above like the head, like above the tree line, and then like a lot of times we'll see if, like in a lot of those pictures, which I thought was very interesting. And when they were out there talking too, like Jim was one of the members, he was talking about too, like sometimes they'd see like a red light out there, and like he'd go chasing after this because what they use is they use red headlamps for the reason of the white light tends to scare away animals, so they don't tend to get as much activity. Just natural animals, like the red light doesn't affect them as much as like white light, whereas they're gonna kind of go away from it. And they believe that's kind of the same thing with Bigfoot as well. But he said like he would see this one red light, and they know like where their team members are. So it's just kind of disembodied, but it looks like a red headlamp like they have, and that go dirt into the woods, and he'd go following after it. But that was the kind of the stories they were just kind of telling us as we were kind of going through the first night. And then they were talking too about kind of going out there and kind of different like tree structures and stuff like they would build. Like they don't believe it's for shelter, but maybe something as, to communicate spots for. And he's talking about like how like the Bigfoot ones, like you can tell, he said like that, you can tell because like a lot of times you have trees will break or whatever as animals go through, or you have wind will knock stuff down. But he says like with the Bigfoot ones, it will take it and it'll be like twisted. Like you take it like this and, turn it, and so like the fibers are all like turned inside it rather than just a clean snap.
Okay.
So that's one of the things I thought was kind of interesting. And then, too, he was talking about, this was like the third night, too, some of the other one of the stories he was telling was like, there was like this farmer or whatever, and like he had like his trough or whatever was getting like moved and pushed and stuff like that. And he believed it was, like a Bigfoot or whatever. So like he's like, well, I just want to keep this thing off my land, like from like destroying my stuff. Like it can stay out there, but so like he said, well, set up trap cams or whatever along the perimeter of like your property, of like where you want to keep it out from, because like for whatever reason they don't usually get captured on trail cams. They seem to avoid that area. And his theory is that they can actually see that infrared light from the trail cam and they'll actually avoid it, because they said like in that particular case what it was doing is like it would go to like the edge of where the lights would be, and it would set up rocks so it could tell where like the perimeter was to stay away from the trap cam lights. So I thought, because like you said, like on like the trap cam videos, they weren't getting like Bigfoot on there, but they would get like rocks flying through the air. So like it was like throwing rocks to test to see like where like the rock would go to set off the light. So it kind of would know like a boundary area to kind of avoid, to stay out of it. So I thought that was a very interesting, which definitely shows a very high level of intelligence.
Yeah. So I was going to say that begs the question to now ask, with the red versus the infrared light, wouldn't that show up more on the spectrum of they're seeing then if they can see the infrared?
You would think so, yeah, but that's just kind of what their theory is with it. And it might just be more to keep the animals closer than to keep it spooked. Because like with natural animals, most animals, you're more likely to get closer to them with a red light than you are with a white light, because the white lights, like a lot of them are kind of, that will spook a lot of animals off, just out of doing natural, like animal observing kind of stuff like that. But as far as like Bigfoot, yeah, you'd think it would see the red light. That was kind of the same question I kind of had too with that. If they can see the infrared, but maybe that's the reason why they're not getting as many reactions, because the other animals might be scared away from the white light, or the ones that are doing like the howling back. That could be a part of it there. Whereas with the red light, they aren't going as far away.
Now, Rich had mentioned to me that the white light, he thinks that a lot of the animals, and especially the Bigfoot, associate white light with man. And that's one of the reasons they try to avoid it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Because with much more flashlights are more white light than most of the time you aren't really using red, unless, I mean, there are red flashlights out there, but the majority of the time you're using a white light, so. But yeah.
Right. So what about some of the other experiences you had up there?
Well, for ours, it was definitely more like that first night too, like when Bill and them were out. And maybe, Bill, it'd be better to describe what you were kind of seeing out there, the sparklies as you were calling them.
Well, at one point, they took, these guys have been out in this area numerous times. And they have a very unique mapping system. They took us to an area they refer to as Mattress, which is right along the river. And the reason it's called Mattress is because they found an old mattress. So it was kind of interesting how they marked their areas on their map. But at Mattress, there was probably 12 of us in this area, and we were probably within 15, 20 feet of each other, spread out in an area. And it was pitch black. You could look up, you could see the stars, but once you got below the tree line, you didn't see nothing. And at one point, I had heard a sound off in the woods, and I got a hold of Jim and a couple other people to listen to see if they could hear it. And as I'm staring off into the woods, I see what looks like glittery, sparkly dust floating around. And I figure to myself, I figure it's eye strain because I'm trying to look into pure black. So I didn't say nothing. We got to another location they call the Ridge, and I happened to notice Jim and Tammy both heading away from the group, staring off into the darkness, and as they walked past me, they were seeing the same thing, and they were trying to figure out what they were seeing. So there it wrote off to me, this is not eye strain because the three of us are all witnessing at the same time. And this happened several different times throughout the weekend and the night. So it was rather interesting. We never did come to a conclusion as to what it could be. But there's a lot of theories about it.
Yeah, so that was kind of like the first night. That's kind of largely what we were doing. And I can't remember if it was a member of Detroit Paranormal or one of the Bigfoot crew ones, but they felt they were up at one of the lots, and like during the day they felt like something had rushed up to them, and as they were getting into their car, rushed up to the car, but they couldn't see anything. So that's why I was kind of wondering, like, okay, is there possibly a spirit here as well? And then like that second night, now the second night it's downpouring that entire day, like the Saturday, it's just downpouring the entire day.
Oh yeah, we were soaked to the bone, man.
So while that, we, like me, Bill, and Connie, we went into town for a while, and then we kind of came back probably about noon, I would say. And it's still downpouring. Everybody else that was camping there, they all went into town. So it was just the three of us in the campground at the time. So like me and Bill went and walked to the other end of the campground, and when Connie was in the camper, all of a sudden she had something come up and shake the camper. But we didn't realize it at the time. So me and Bill got back, and the camper's locked. So we're like, Connie, why do you got the camper locked for? You know, Bill's like, what are you goofing around? You know, it's like, no, that will teach you or whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. Like, I don't know what you're mad at me for. But, you know, so then like later we're all like getting ready for bed, and she's sitting there like, she like whispered to Bill, and she's like, you know, that wasn't funny what you did earlier or whatever. And he's like, what are you talking about? I didn't do anything. But just when you shoved the camper, he's like, I didn't push the camper. I didn't hit the, you know, like. So like she asked me, like, did Bill? I'm like, no, we just walked back, and then that was it. You know, we didn't do anything. So it was like 3-4 minutes before I heard you guys walking back up, something went and shook the camper, and we're like, no, you know. Like later when we talked to Rich about it, he was like, because Rich had been like, he'd done like bear hunting expeditions where they would have to go out because like after night they can't carry the guns out or whatever there, so sometimes they would have to go out there and like kill the wounded bear or whatever. So that's why. So he was kind of very familiar with bear ones. So he's like, okay, go in there, and I'm going to go and act like the way a bear would, because he's like, a bear will go and throw its shoulder into it, because the way the camper is, because it's canvas on the top, if it stood up on its hind legs and pushed, it's going to shove into that canvas. So like if a bear is pushing it, he's going to put his shoulder into it and rock it along, you know, kind of go along the edge of it. It's not going to give it the one good shove. And he's like, is this kind of what it would be? Now, probably it's not as strong as a bear, but it's just kind of as an example. She's like, no, it wasn't like that. So then he went and took, basically almost kind of like you're doing like a football drill. You're going into the, you know, the tackling dummy or whatever, you're the sled, and you're pushing the sled. That's kind of what he did. Is he lined up in that stance, went and pushed on it like that, and shook the camper. And she's like, yeah, that's exactly what it was like. So that was definitely very kind of interesting. And it's like, yeah, it wasn't like any of us, because like we timed it out too. Like about, if we were 3-4 minutes, we would have been down at the boat launch. So we would have been a good distance where we couldn't see the camper. You know, if it happened, so it could have happened, and then it could have, you know, when she yelled, it could have wandered off. The ground there is pretty much like all rocks and was hard surface from everything being packed down. So like there weren't any tracks or anything, which I wish there would have been, but that was kind of very interesting.
So no hair, no damage to the camper.
No. So I can't say for sure what it was, but it was definitely a very interesting experience anyway for Connie.
Now, we did look for prints and stuff, because there's a lot of deer and all that around there. And deer with their sharp hooves might have left a print. But the ground was rocks and packed rocks, and there was no sign of any of the foliage around the camper being trampled on. There was no print whatsoever, no overturned rocks. You know, it was very weird situation, and it put Connie on nerve the rest of the weekend.
Yeah. I got to give Connie credit though, because I'm surprised she wasn't like, after she found that, I was surprised she wasn't like, okay, we got to pack up and go now, we're not staying anymore. So I give her credit for sticking it out through the weekend. So yeah, so then like after it rained and stuff, all that, then that night or whatever, we're trying to decide what to do, because it's downpouring. So we're like, they're like, well, we could go into town and tell you more stories, or if you want to stay, we could try to do like an expedition. We're like, well, since we've had activity kind of in the campground, why don't we just stay right here in the campground rather than go hiking while it's downpouring, especially too if the storm gets worse. At least we're close to, go to the campers or whatever, the tents. So like me and Bill decided to go up to Lot 9. Oh yeah, and then it was like the night before too. I'm going to go back to the night when we were doing the expedition. Connie and one of the other team members' wife, they stayed behind in camp, and they were seeing like a red eye shine, but they were hearing like a drumming too, like a drumming noise. And they were seeing like a red light on like where the boat launch area was. So like the thing that kind of reminded me of was the Mackinac Island ferries. 'Cause I remember Todd Clement said he would hear, sometimes they would hear drumming like by the arch rock, and then they would see the ferry light. So that's what kind of, and she's seeing like the red light over there, which they thought was like eye shine. But that's why I kind of wonder too if that might have been something more ferry, especially as the next night when it was downpouring. So me and Bill are sitting there. Originally we were going to sit from like kind of the roadside and face out. And as soon as we sit down, all of a sudden we hear 2 knocks behind us. We radio, okay, did you 2 do any knocks? So I'm like, okay, well, we're not going to sit both facing the same direction. We're going to have each other's back, So then we sat opposite directions.
It was kind of interesting at that point, too. We'd come up there with a couple lawn chairs and a huge tarp so we could stay dry. That didn't happen.
No, because I wasn't sitting facing the same direction. If I heard the 2 knocks behind me, like I'm watching the back. I'm not looking the same way you are. Especially because it's pitch dark out there, too. So, like as we're seeing out there, then Bill was seeing those lights again. And then like I started seeing, for mine I was seeing like almost like a bluish purple kind of like light. It would kind of like would wander down the trail. Like it would stand in one spot. And it almost felt like I felt like that was a human spirit, kind of like watching me, kind of keep an eye. And Bill was like, I feel like something's watching us, And then I was like, well, that's going on. And then at the same time, all of a sudden, like when he's seeing that, I was seeing like bright white flashes of light going by me, like really, really fast. Like it would light up, and I'd be like, Bill, are you turning your flashlight on? Because that's the natural thought is, okay, Bill's putting his flashlight on to shine at something because maybe he hears a noise. I'm like, no, my flashlight's not on. But it would like light up my arm and stuff like on the opposite side because like Bill would be sitting here and it's like lighting up my left hand side, but it'd be really fast. Like if you were to click a flashlight on like behind me like really fast, So I was like, okay, I don't know what that is because none of us have a light on it. It's pitch dark out here, And then we were just kind of hearing more noises in the woods. And then was there anything else, Bill, that you wanted to add from that night?
We could hear things. We were debunking things as we could go. We could hear sounded like footsteps coming towards us quite a bit. And then we would also realize that we would hear the footsteps as the wind was blowing through the trees, and it was causing the rain and the leaves to sound like footsteps. So once we realized that helped lower the creep factor that we were experiencing quite a bit. But I mean, at the same time we're experiencing this stuff, you got Connie and several other people down by the river who are probably 200 yards, 250 yards from where we're at. And they're seeing eye shine across the river. They're hearing noises like something's walking through the woods around them, like it's watching them. So it's almost like we've got activity coming from like 3 different directions now. So it was very, very interesting. And it wasn't just Bigfoot activity. We're pretty sure that there's a lot of paranormal activity going on there. We found out that this campground used to be a Indian village. And by looking at the terrain across the river, which is federal land, which we couldn't go on, that terrain looks very similar to what an Indian burial ground might have been.
Well, was that verified, or I think that's what one of the Detroit ones. I think that's what they were kind of feeling about.
And Tammy thought that too, but the burial ground wasn't verified.
Yeah.
But I believe it was Tammy. I think it was Tammy told me that she knew that the Indian village used to be in this area somewhere.
Okay, it would make sense because like the area where he is, you're right on a river too, so. And you have higher ground, so it'd make a good spot to have a little village there too. But I just wanted to see if they had found something I didn't know about to verify it, other than just the medium's feelings on it.
Right, that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
because I believe in that area, the Ojibwa and I can't remember the name of the other one. Starts with an M.
I believe Tammy said it was the Ojibwa.
Okay. Well, if I remember how their borders, their tribal borders were, they were like that area was right there for both of them.
Yeah, it was like, you looked up when we went over to your house on the way back, and it was kind of like right between the borders. But back then, the tribes could have been a lot different too, so there's a lot of two different tribal groups, at least in that same kind of right in the border region between the two tribal groups.
Now, it would be interesting to also do some more research on this because I was just thinking about it. Because there's a lot of different Bigfoots around the world. You got your Yeti and stuff like that. And it seems to always be with a culture that has a kind of like a religious belief when it comes to nature. I'm kind of curious on like the Tibetan monks with the Yeti, the Native Americans with the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch, stuff like that.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to check out.
Yeah, that is definitely very interesting. And my whole thing, too, is I think it might be because there's a lot of what I believe was kind of fairy activities. It kind of matched a lot with Todd Clement's from when our podcast was talking about like the Mackinac Island fairies. There seemed to be a lot of similarities between what was going on there. And like when Rich from the group was talking about there being like a lot of times the green orb above, it kind of makes me wonder, is Bigfoot a type of fairy creature? Is it something of that realm? Or is it a spiritual creature? Like, I think there's so many different theories because we don't have a body of it to study to prove that it is an actual animal. But I do think I think there's something to the stories. But whether it's an actual animal or not, that I'm not sure on.
One of the lost links to humanity that never finished evolving.
Yeah.
So I bet a lot of the people out here would be watching this would have a lot of the same questions of if they do exist, how come we don't see any type of actual culture to an extent? A grave, no graves of anything, no remains. Yeah. Stuff like that. So, what did Rich have to say about that? If those questions came up.
Bill, do you got anything to add on that?
I did talk with Rich about that. And basically, his response to me was, we don't know. However, judging by his experiences and the things that he's learned in the field, he believes they are as intelligent, or if not more intelligent than us. And they fear us as a predator, an animal would fear a predator. And he kind of believes along the lines that the reason we don't find this stuff is because they don't want us to find it. Now, it's not much of an answer, but they really don't have an answer for it. They're still trying to figure that out. Like we look at why we can't see apparitions all the time in our field. And it's kind of the same thing. You see it when they want you to see it. And that's about it. So it's really one of those questions that if somebody comes up with the answer, we're going to solve the riddle.
One thing I really liked about their group, too, with talking to them is they definitely have a very much an open mind. Like we kind of go into cases, we have a theory, and we try to test out that theory, whether it's correct or wrong. And they kind of do, but we try to, at least for me, like try to keep open a lot of different possibilities as what it could be. Whether not just rule out that it has to be this one thing. Like if you go into it, like the Ada Witch, the Ada Witch is real, it has to be. It's like you got to go, what paranormal activity could be there? What's the cause of the legend? Kind of stuff like that. And like with their group, that's what they believe it's an animal, but they keep open the possibility that it could be something else as well. And that's one of the things I really like, because they're like, we don't like the ones that like you have to keep an open mind that Bigfoot could be something else outside. Like, well, we believe it's an animal. It could be a spiritual. It could be something spiritual or a combination of. And that's kind of the way that I feel. Like it's it could be a physical animal, but I think it could very well be a spiritual animal.
We also
be a ghost of something that that lived before.
We also discussed with Tammy the fact about portals, because I told her, I says, I find it hard to believe that if this is a real creature, it has the power to create a portal, and it's the only creature in the world that has that power. You know, to me, that seemed really far-fetched. And she says, well, look at it this way. What if what you're seeing is not the actual creature, and it is the spirit of the creature? Maybe, you know, we see ghosts. Maybe that's what we're seeing, a ghost squatch. It's an interesting take on it. I don't know that I buy it, because a lot of these sightings, people see these things run away. They, you know, if it disappears, it goes behind a tree and disappears. Okay, if it's spiritual, to me, it would just fade out right in your view. But again, it's one of the questions we're looking to answer.
So the whole thing is like, well, stuff in the paranormal, we have such little to go on that it's like for me, it's like you got to keep open different theories, you know, explore the
Right.
different theories, test them out, you know.
See, now, I myself definitely not a believer in Bigfoot whatsoever, but I could actually see some type of truth behind it being spiritual, an apparition of something. And the one thing too is you know, Bill did mention that you know, with apparitions sometimes they'd rather fade out, but you also see some of the from other videos that seem to be legit, not proven to be fake or anything.
Yeah.
Where something will rush up and then quickly turn and run around a corner because it felt like it got spotted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could see a Bigfoot being more of that than something actually living, because when there's something living, there's always some evidence of it being around.
Yeah.
Whether it's simple tools, a corpse, even a pile of poo rocks, whatever, you know, it takes a dump and it puts rocks around it so it knows that's where it is so it doesn't step on it or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's nothing of that. And to me, I feel that, you know, Bigfoot or the Sasquatch is worse off than someone who goes out and ghost hunts or investigates that aspect of the paranormal, because a lot of people have faked the evidence and there's been nothing to be proven, whereas with the spirits, you know, there's, you know, disembodied voices, footsteps, shadows that have moved on their own. Even with UFOs, you'll see like a light just kind of going along and all of a sudden just blinks out, or it just fades off like it's going out of the atmosphere and stuff like that.
Now,
you know,
as far as the evidence you're talking of, some of the things they showed us, the twisted tree branches, the shelters that are too big for another animal to make, or the stone markers, these things do happen. We've seen them out there. We didn't get to see the markers, but we did see some of the twisted branches. We did see some possible shelters that were old and weathered, probably abandoned, Rich said. And these things are there. They just can't prove who did it. But the size of these things and the areas where they're broke and stuff, there are no other animals in this continent that could have created something like that. These are primate behaviors. We have no wild primates.
okay. Well, the trees being twisted, the branches, stuff like that one I can't explain. But when it comes to like the weathered looking shelters, one of the more logical aspects is it was probably someone who was out hunting and didn't have enough to purchase like a blind or want to use something more natural, and they would have built that.
And it's a
to hunt
possibility. It very well is. The tree branches now, I saw an article on that where a scientist explained them. And when she explained them, she says that the wind can break it at any height.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I asked Rich more about that, because to me, that made perfect sense. If the tree is diseased or the wind hits it just right and the weather conditions are just right, that tree is going to snap. But what Rich pointed out was the twisting effect. When a Bigfoot breaks it, he kind of just twists back and forth. He's loosening all the fibers. They're not breaking. And then when it falls, the ones that do break end up with a curly-Q look to them because of being twisted so much. And it's really kind of interesting. You're not going to find that in a natural tree break.
No, but here's a rebuttal to that. What about like those mini tornadoes or where the wind is going in the circular pattern? What if that gets caught in it? Since it's green, it would become fibrous.
I would suspect that in that situation, you're going to have more than one tree. And another thing that's interesting is when you usually see these tree breaks, you see them on game trails, or you see them pointing towards rivers or ponds, water sources. You see them going in the direction that a intelligent animal would be going to find food or water or whatever.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, just interesting theories. That's like I said, is my expertise is ghosts. I'm just getting into the Bigfoot stuff myself. So, but like I guess my whole thing is I like to, even if it's something I don't necessarily believe in, it's like I like to study all the different areas of the paranormal, you know, and like learn more about everything. Because there's a lot of areas, like when we were going there, I think we had a lot more going on than Bigfoot, you know. Mm-hmm. And there's like I've seen like a lot of reports like that too, where it's like there's certain areas that are just hot spots. Like you have UFO sightings, ghost sightings, you know, fairy, Bigfoot. You'll have like a lot of different things all in similar areas, like hot paranormal hot spots.
Right.
So that's why I kind of wonder too. And it's like, I think it was like Tenny said, like sometimes you just got to play the game. You have to go looking for one thing and you'll get something else entirely. So I think it's good to have kind of try to study different fields, you know.
Okay. So I guess I think I heard that they were planning on doing another training up there. You plan on going
I'm going
up there?
back up there, yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that you could think of that you'd like to talk about for this subject?
In terms of like Bigfoot, I just like to get you up there next. If you can get you up there,
I'm being forced to, apparently.
I'm telling you what, even if there's no Bigfoot, that weekend was a blast. And then there was a funny story too with Bill, because we were up there. He'd gotten out of his chair to go look at something while it was downpouring, so his chair ended up getting a big puddle of water on it.
Oh.
So he ended up sitting down in freezing cold water. I was there, woo! I'm like, what, did you see something? No, I'm like, chair.
Puddle was not the word for it. That, in the 30 seconds I stood up, there was at least a gallon of water in that chair. And it was ice cold, man.
Yeah. I would prefer not to go do that when it's raining.
Yeah. Well, that was the downside, because like I was experiencing seeing stuff. I'm like, man, I wish I had my camera out here. But if I had my camera, I may not have experienced it either, you know.
Right.
Because it's raining, I couldn't have my gear out. And I like a lot of times when this stuff happens, like even like doing ghost hunting, it's like when I see something, it's when my camera starts malfunctioning or the battery dies for no reason. That's like when I seen the full form apparition at the radio station. My camera was malfunctioning, so like I turned it off. Like after that, it started back up and was working fine. But it's just in that little time where the camera didn't want to work, that's when I could see the apparition. So I think sometimes there's more to not having all the gear to actually to have the experience, I think, too.
So is there stuff that we should look out for identifying with Bigfoot besides the average tree twisting and stuff like that we've talked about already?
Yeah, I mean, there's like the Bigfoot footprints. I mean, you obviously want to look for hair, anything where you can collect evidence. Again, the hair could come from like anything. That's why they try to collect hair samples and send it out or whatever. And it's just kind of stuff like that. I mean, Bill, is there anything else that?
Well, yeah, you're looking for hair. You're looking for things that are out of place. You're looking for the stone markers. These stone markers could be on a trail. They could be near a farm. They're usually 2 to 3 stones stacked on top of each other. Usually a large, small, smaller. Those are good indicators. Those things too, if you see one and you knock it down, a lot of people report that they'll come back the next day and it'll be restacked.
Or it'll be bigger stones
Or
put there.
it'll be bigger stones, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the game trails, you want to look at things that are usually 5 to 8 feet high for tree breaks and stuff like that. A lot of these things you'll walk right past if you're not paying attention to them. You hear tree knocks. There's some of the other things that they do. You see them on the Bigfoot shows, all up there pounding on the trees and going, all excited because something echoed back, you know. But the reality of it is, it's kind of like Morse code for Bigfoot. A certain number of knocks could be anything from a warning to, hey, I'm over here, you know. And they don't know the code, but it's things like that that they listen for. Whoops. Here, it's a regular, it's not like they do on the Bigfoot shows where they're howling. It's actually a whoop. We actually heard a few whoops while we were out there. And it's kind of it sounds like somebody going whoop, and that's it. And it's not a long howl. It's crazy stuff.
One of the other things I thought was interesting too, because he was talking about they believe like the coyotes. They think the coyotes might actually follow the Bigfoot. So I think the Bigfoot will go and kill something, eat what it wants, and leave like the rest for like the coyotes. I know that was one of the things. There was one other thing I forgot to add. The one night we were up in the pouring rain, we had these wooden dowels we were using as tree knockers. So like I'm just sitting there like, well, I'm just gonna tap it on the ground and see if anything happens, you know, like not really expecting anything. So like you can feel it vibrate, you know, you can feel the ground vibrate and you hear that. And then all of a sudden I got responses back to it, and you could feel the ground vibrating like it was right next to us. And I don't think that was like a Bigfoot, but like that's when we were seeing the fairy light. So I'm like, what could be creating that? Because we tried to recreate it going away. Like for something to re-tap it, it would have to have been, to have that same vibration, it would have to have been like pretty close to us, like within the lot, because we're sitting in the middle of this camp lot. So like that was something I couldn't explain. I tried going back there the next day and trying to recreate it, and it didn't do it. So it's like, I don't, that was one thing I don't know how to explain, like what that was. But it was at the time we were seeing the fairy lights, and like the reporting of the drumming thing, I almost kind of went like with that, if they use some sort of a drumming as a form of communication, not the Bigfoot, but like maybe like the fairy type of creatures. Because I like the drumming on Mackinac Island and stuff too. That's why I kind of wonder if that's some sort of communication between them or something. And by tapping that, I wonder if that was kind of a response back. Because it kind of has kind of a drum sound to it when you do it. But that was just one thing I thought was kind of interesting, because I don't know because if it was just an echo, you would just hear the echo back. You wouldn't feel the ground vibrate when you tap the ground. So
now there's another thing about it that really got my interest, and it's something that I want to learn more about, both for future expeditions and for our aspects in the paranormal and the ghostly side of things. And that's the infrasound. If you look at large predators, lions and tigers, they have a growl which creates infrasound, which can be felt by its prey, and in some cases is supposed to stun the prey. Bigfoot is supposed to be known for having this infrasound growl. We didn't get to experience anything like that, but in our search for Bigfoot, it might be interesting to find a way to produce or get a recording of one of these tiger growls or a cougar growl that has this infrasound in it, and project that into the woods to see what type of response. Maybe we can get a territorial thing going. I spoke with Jim Shepard, one of the gentlemen on the expedition, and he liked the idea. So it's something that we're both going to look into for future uses up there.
Interesting. So, okay, you mentioned a theory that coyotes follow Sasquatch because it would kill, eat what it wants, and then leave. Now, I thought they were more like a off-branch vegan, like fish and berries and stuff like that. They wouldn't go kill for red meat.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, they're all operating again on theory, and like one of the theories is more omnivores, where like they eat, both plants and eat animals as well. So that might be the reason why they don't devour the whole thing, because their size, you'd think they would eat the whole animal if they were going to kill something.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's only eating like the parts that it wants, and its diet is with something else, And then, do you remember the story with the coyote story? I know it was something with train tracks. Do you remember that story, Bill?
No, I vaguely remember, but not enough to.
Yeah, because that's what it was. It was something about filming of something going, but I can't remember the story exactly. I was hoping Bill remembered it, but that's what they were talking about, like the coyotes, believing the coyotes followed it or whatever. But again, it's all operation on theory. Just
and it was kind of interesting too, because the third night that we were up there, it was just Brandon, Connie, and myself. Everybody else had left. So we're in the middle of this campground. We're the only people in it. And we sat up till the firewood burned out before we went to bed. And we're freaking ourselves out. We're talking about different things and talking about the different experiences we had. We go, finally the fire burns out. We go climb into the camper and each get into bed there. And we're in bed 15 minutes and we hear a pack of coyotes just a howling like mad come into the campground and then stop instantly. And I hadn't told Connie the story yet, and I wasn't sure that Brandon was aware of it either, about the coyotes following the squatches. So I just kept my mouth shut. And
the coyotes themselves freaked me out, because I was like just dozing off to sleep and be like, what in the world was that? So all the coyotes howling.
We get calmed down after that, and I haven't said nothing to Connie about it. And those two doze off. I can hear both of them snoring, and I'm just a frickin' nervous wreck because of thinking of that story in my head. I laid there another hour before I got to doze off, and just after I dozed off, I got awoke by a bear roaring maybe 100 feet from the camper. Scared the shit out of me. I had to go to the bathroom so bad, but I didn't dare get out of the camper.
Yeah, it's like when I woke up and he's like, just go outside the camper. He's like, don't try walking anywhere. Something's out right outside there.
So, would you feel that a squatch would attack if threatened? And if so, how would you defend yourself against one?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a key one where we definitely want to be armed. Next time, I know some of their group had it, but we didn't. Like that last night we were staying there. That's the part I was kind of nervous about, was just in case. But he said like the ones there, like they feel like they're more curious, like they're not really aggressive. Like that's why he likes to bring people out there that are kind of that he's like training on or whatever. So he said they more kind of stay to themselves, but they kind of curious of kind of what's going on. That's what they kind of feel on that. So
now Rich did mention to me at one point that there was another area they go to where they're a lot more aggressive. And I believe he said that area was known for people who have disappeared. Whether that's connected to a squatch, nobody knows. But I mean, if you got an aggressive animal, the possibility is there.
So, how would one defend against?
yeah,
Because I guess the whole tree twisting thing is a sign of strength.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if they're strong enough to take
That's always
a
the
green,
danger of going and doing it, because if it gets you, you're gone. If it wants to be aggressive to you, so that's a risk you take when you go out there. But it's the same thing as you're taking the same risk. I mean, if Bigfoot's not real, you're still taking the risk with the bears and coyotes being out there
And
too.
mountain lions and
Yeah.
There's a lot of predators out where we were at.
Yeah, well, they are. Did they release like a mountain lion, like in that? Because basically where that campground is, it's like a state forest on one side of the river, and then the other side of the river is a national wildlife preserve. So that's why it's in the middle of nowhere, because you have, both sides of the river there's nothing there, because there's state forest and a national wildlife preserve on the other side.
To me, it would seem defense is an issue, but judging by the little bit that I'm learning right now, I think it's more of a matter of the only way you're going to have to really worry about an attack is if you manage to corner something like this. And in this case of what I know, it seems like that would be very hard to do because they're in their neck of the woods. They have better senses than we do, and their biggest goal is to stay away from us. So I think it'd be really hard to get into that situation unless you're in more of an aggressive area. Rich did tell us of a family who was feeding some local squatches. They would take and leave out, excuse me, different produce and meat scraps and things like that, and they would leave them out in the backwoods. They believed they were feeding a squatch because of footprints and stuff they found, but they never casted anything. And Rich warned them that that's not the thing to do, because come the day that you leave, you move, and somebody else moves in, and they're not feeding this, that's going to cause anger in this thing, and it is going to come closer and start doing things to find out where its food supply went.
Well, he did tell one of it was a story of he was it was like a supplier for some like meat and cheese company or something, I believe. And he'd get expired food because he'd be go distribute the food, and then when it expired he'd take the old food out and supply new food, and he'd have the extra food, so he'd dump it out on the back of his land, and then for whatever it would get eaten or whatever, and then when he's and then all of a sudden business got it where he wasn't having as much expired food because the stuff was selling more, or his inventory was inventory got adjusted or whatever, and then his truck would get attacked and get torn apart and stuff like that, someone physically tried to get into the truck to try to get the food because he wasn't leaving it out in the yard anymore to and I think too, was there a camera or something he put on the top and it would bend the camera down or something?
Yep.
Yeah.
And too with the farmer that he had mentioned earlier who had the trough getting thrown, that farmer had also put up brand new posts and barbed wire fence around the pasture. And not only did he find the trough, but he found the barbed wire fence pulled out, rolled up, the poles, the barb, and everything rolled up and sitting in the middle of the field. It's impressive shit that these things can get to if their food supply is threatened.
Oh, that is definitely interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they definitely had some interesting stories. So.
Well, yeah, I think I'm kind of running out of questions here.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, because it's all about one weekend, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm telling that we got 15 minutes left. So, is there anything that you would hope to experience the next time you go up there?
I would definitely I'm kind of there to experience what I can experience. If I can get more, try to experience more of the Bigfoot thing, because I don't know if I really experienced that, but just experiencing, because like when I sat down there that second night when it was raining, I'm like, oh, there's something here. I can feel the energy, I can't tell if it's human or elemental or whatever. I think it was probably a combination of the two, so it's even experiencing that, it's that for me, it's worth going back up there just to find out, even if it's not about Bigfoot, to find more about the fairy lights we were seeing, or to see if I definitely want to go out there and take the dowel and try doing that knocking again, doing that tapping on the ground and see if I can get response back, and definitely try to retest, because that's what mine always is even if I'm doing ghost hunting, if I go to a location and I experience something, that next time I want to go back, I want to retest that again and see if it repeats itself.
Right.
Or if it's something that I can debunk, So that's definitely for me, it's definitely why I want to go back up there.
Yeah, I know that when
and
we do
just
go,
the camaraderie of hanging out with with the Bigfoot group too.
Yeah.
They were a blast
it was a
to
riot.
hang out with.
Being a sober weekend, it was a riot. But I know that we went up there in the beginning under the impression we're going to hear some stories, we're going to hike around, we're going to learn a few things.
And that's what I was expecting going up
We
there.
weren't expecting an experience in the Bigfoot realm at all, let alone in the paranormal world. So we came up underdressed, the way I look at it. The next time we go up, all of our equipment's coming up.
Yeah.
We may not be able to use the IRs and the trail cams for the Bigfoot stuff. We'll have to come up with new techniques for that. But there is a lot going on in our own expertise that I want to explore.
Yeah, it's like I was sitting up there and I'm like, and I was seeing the lights, I'm like, man, I wish I had my Estes gear because I want to go back up here, take my Estes gear and run it and see what happens, you know, like just to see if we can use that to communicate with them, you know.
Right.
So, or with the spirit that I felt was there too. So, like that's definitely the thing. That's why I'm sitting like, man, I'm kicking myself. I'm like, oh, it's Bigfoot hunting. I don't need to have all my ghost hunting gear. I'm like, now I wish I brought all my ghost hunting gear with me up there too, you know. So like definitely that's what I'm bringing up next time too, to try to get, you know, collect more evidence too. I definitely learned a lesson. Even if I'm doing anything, bring all your stuff anyway, even if you don't think you're going to use it, you know. But that's one thing I definitely learned from that weekend. So
that's good. All right. Well, I think we might end this a little short, so I want to thank you again for coming back. I do know that we have an announcement. I'm going to pass it off to Bill. This one is dealing with a library talk that our group is doing, which Bill and I will be presenting. So, Bill?
Yeah, we have a couple announcements to make here. First off, October 29th at the Tamarack District Library in Lakeview, Michigan, which is north of Greenville there. We're going to have a paranormal discussion. I think Mike and I will both be there. You guys are welcome to come out and join us. There's no charge for that. And then keep an eye on our Facebook and our website pages there, because hopefully here in a week or so we're going to be posting a discussion, a podcast with Wayne. And Wayne is going to be having both myself and Rich from the Upper Peninsula Bigfoot Sasquatch Research Organization.
Such a mouthful.
Oh, yes.
yeah, they were joking around too. They were talking about like the fairies. Like, oh, you got that up here too, or whatever. It's like, I don't know. I don't think we can add fairies into our title because that might get even longer than what it already is.
It might even mess up the acronym that you have there, too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you again. And if you have any questions and want to contact us, our email is grasp.org. And you can also visit us on Facebook at GRASPP Paranormal Investigators. I want to thank you again for watching this, and see you next time.
A correction there, Mikey. It's GRASPP Beyond at grasp.org.
GRASPP Beyond. My apologies. I forgot that we have that set up now. So graspbeyond.org. Once again, I'd like to thank you for tuning in.
The opinions expressed in the preceding program are those of the producer and not necessarily those of WKTV Community Media.